All right, so just to introduce myself, I'm Lisa Pierson, and I am the mother of two daughters. I have a daughter, Lucy, she's 15, and I have an older daughter, Ella, who is 17. And one of the things that's really important to me as a parent is that I teach them independence and self-reliance. I want them to be able to take care of themselves without having to rely on someone else. And for me, one of the things that you need to do to be independent is to learn how to drive and get your driver's license. I mean, there's other things, of course, too, but that's just something I feel very strongly about as a parent. In fact, I feel so strongly that when I found out my partner's daughter was 18 and still didn't know how to drive, I paid for her to take lessons. So as soon as Ella, my older one, was old enough, I took her to a parking lot to start teaching her how to drive. I was so excited. She's super excited. You know, I even wanted to document her doing her first figure eights in a parking lot. So let me just show you this quickly.
Okay, slow down, turn to right. You're so cute.
So I wasn't really feeling cute in that moment. I was actually terrified. She almost hit this staircase that was there. And I was trying to stay positive. Like I was trying to be encouraging with my kids. This is something that I felt strongly about, like I said, her entire life. But suddenly this very strong belief that every young person should get their driver's license and their independence, had some new feelings in the mix, fear and my own personal safety. So the next time that she wanted to get in the car, I had to talk myself into it, to do it for my daughter. My strong belief was suddenly very shaky. So that video was actually taken over a year ago, and she actually just got her driver's license last month. She bought herself a crappy little car, and she's a great driver, but I am still gritting my teeth, every time I'm in the passenger seat and I'm doing all of the annoying things that passengers do, the sudden intake of breath and putting my hand on the dashboard to brace myself for an oncoming collision that doesn't actually happen. And I'm telling you this to illustrate how we as human beings can know something logically, but also hold multiple emotions and beliefs at the same time. We're irrational, anxious, scared, and determined, and a million other things too. I can really want my daughter to learn how to drive at the same time as being terrified and reluctant to teach her. So, when we understand this, and not just understand, but also have it guide us, having this in our mind while we're writing our copy, we have a much better chance of reaching people. So today, that's what we're going to cover. I'm going to show you those 4 questions you can ask before you start writing. And the answers that you find to those questions will help guide you as you write copies and help you connect emotionally with your reader. So I'm going to share a quick case study about how I use this particular set of questions and the results it achieved. Now, before we get there, why is it important to connect on an emotional level? Because that's how we make decisions, right? There's a ton of research on this, more than I could possibly talk about in a 20-minute presentation. But we know that if we can reach someone emotionally first, it gives us the opportunity to compel action. So in the book, probably read it, How Customers Think, Gerald Zaltman shows how 95% of our cognition happens in our emotional brain. So if we're not reaching people emotionally, we don't actually have, we're not giving them the resources necessary for them to make a decision. So if we're only writing copy just about, say, our features and even our benefits in a shallow way or a very matter of fact to the point kind of way, even if those features are unique and amazing, it still takes a lot of work on the reader's part to understand actually how their lives will be different or why they should even care. And that's what we're selling, right? We are selling the reader, your customer or client, on their transformation. So we need to focus on that value that your customers want. And what your customers value is in fact an emotional thing. I'm not talking about things like free shipping or a particular feature. Now, this part can be difficult to execute because it is a way of thinking, it's an approach. And it's a bit deeper than the basic, advice that we get about copywriting, which is also important. So, what do I mean by the basic advice about copywriting? I'm talking about the do's and don'ts, words to avoid, focus on the benefits, not the features. I'm sure you've all heard this. And this advice isn't wrong. Lots of it is right. Write like you speak, use power words, all good advice. But that's just one part of it. These are what I would call, the basic mechanics of copywriting. But copywriting is more than mechanics. Simply using an active voice with someone who is unaware or in pain or really busy really isn't enough to get them to feel something strongly enough that it will change their behavior. And that's what copy is meant to do. It's meant to change someone's behavior to have them take an action. So the other advice that we get is to research our customer. And this is essential. Full stop. Don't write one word until you do this. And it's why copywriters dig deep with customers and clients in interviews or surveys. And these are some questions that we ask at different parts of the customer journey. What are they struggling with? What's going on in your life that made you want to buy now? What would you change about the product or service if you had a magic wand? Again, this isn't all the questions. These are just some typical questions that we ask. And they're good questions, good advice. It helps for us to start understanding what they want and what they need to actually change their behavior. So those are the essentials of copywriting: copy mechanics, research into your customer, but there's still more. It's still not enough to change someone's behavior. So let's look at this. Behavior change is complicated and complex because it requires a person to disrupt a current habit while simultaneously fostering a new, possibly unfamiliar set of actions. This process takes time, usually longer than we prefer. Something as simple as drinking an extra cup of water a day can take an average of 2 months to become a consistent, habitual behavior. So this is for people who are motivated to change. They want to drink more water, and it still takes them 2 months to change. Most of us aren't that motivated to change. It's easier for us to do nothing. We usually just don't make a decision. If we're using, say, a particular SaaS tool at work every day, and maybe we're not loving it, but we know how to use it, it's comfortable, it's going to be really difficult to change their behavior and have them make the switch, right? Yet something, I notice constantly is that we still, cling to this idea that our copy needs to talk about our features, or even one particular feature, that's unique that the other guys don't have, and that people will just like suddenly make the switch. They'll see the light that this is the product or service is the answer that they've been looking for. But we definitely need more than that, but we shy away from using emotion, or we just don't know how. And I think a lot of it is because emotion makes us uncomfortable. There's a lot of uncertainty with emotion. It can be difficult to nail down. It's much easier for us to think that we just need to try, shortening the copy or making it more catchy. Oh, my favorite instruction that I get about copy: Lisa, can you just make it more catchy? But this is what I want to inspire you to do, to really dig into your copy, to go beyond trying to make your copy as concise as possible, to really ask yourself the hard question of, is what I'm writing really enough to get someone to keep reading, and eventually enough to change their behavior and have them take an action, knowing what I just told you about motivation. So I want to show you a very simple example of what just a few lines, I'm just going to show you 3 lines of copy, can do to make a real difference to your bottom line. But first, so I've shown 2 pieces of advice, the research and the mechanics. Here's some other advice that I want you to follow. The copywriting advice I prefer is from this guy. I know you're all shocked to see a copywriter quoting Don Draper. Not a great dude, I know, but this quote to me is actually some of the best copywriting advice out there. Advertising is based on one thing: happiness. And you know what happiness is? Happiness is the smell of a new car. It's the freedom from fear. It's the billboard at the side of a road that screams with reassurance: whatever you're doing, it's okay. It's all going to be okay. So let's look at an example of happiness and being okay in action. Now, there are other emotions, of course, that we can target, such as pain. But today I'm going to focus on the pull of desire, happiness, and being okay. So this is a pre-sale page that I wrote for a company called Snow. They sell home tooth whitening kits. I know you can't see it. We'll dive in just a sec. But just in case, if you're not familiar with a pre-sale page, they're sometimes called advertorials as well. They can act, I guess, as an intermediary between an ad and a sales page or a product page. They can often look like a blog post. They pre-sell the product. They move someone from a lower stage of awareness to a higher level, and they prime them for the sale. They often don't actually even talk about the product until well into the page, although we took a slightly different approach here. So Snow had a pre-sale page, and they wanted to see if they could improve it. It was written like how many? many products and services are written about. It's very company, very product centric. And yes, you absolutely need to talk about the product on any page to educate readers on the product. But as I'm sure you're aware, you don't sell by simply presenting information. You sell with persuasion. So these are the 2 pages Now, again, I know you can't see everything in this slide, but what I want to show you here on this slide is that version A and version B have almost the identical design. The only difference is that 3 of the images were swapped. So today we're just doing a 20-minute talk. So I'm just going to show you the opening 3 lines of body copy for each version. I'm a copywriter, guys, so we're going to dive really deep into those 3 lines of copy. I'm going to get really nerdy about those 3 lines. I hope you join me. So let me just go on and show you what version A says in that opening body copy. The oral care disruptor based in Arizona was one of the fastest growing brands of 2020 with millions whitening at home now. And for good reason. They have turned an entire industry on its head. Here's why you're going to love snow. All right, so let's look at that. The oral care disruptor, that's the opening part of the first sentence. So probably not what prospects are looking for when they're looking for tooth whitening, right? It doesn't address the customer need that Rachel was just talking about. Obviously, this is a huge accomplishment for Snow. They actually have done some pretty cool things in the whitening world, but this is a very inward-facing statement, right? It's very company-centric. And the second half of that sentence, based in Arizona was one of the fastest growing brands of 2020 with millions whitening at home now. All right, so the second half there, what's going on? It's social proof, right? Which we all know is very important. I think they missed the mark here. Again, it's about Snow and less about the reader. There's also nothing aspirational about this use of social proof. With social proof, we want people to feel trust and to feel like they are part of something they want to be a part of. As humans, we have this universal need for belonging. Now, they could alter this slightly and have a because here, tie the fastest growing part into because of the amazing results people are getting. But as it stands now, they're putting all the weight on the fastest growing brand piece rather than what it actually means for the reader. And the last part, and for good reason, they've turned an entire industry on its head. Here's why you're going to love Snow. Again, all about Snow. And, except for that kind of use of social proof, there's really nothing emotional in those 3 lines. I mean, they use the word love, but there's really nothing that's connecting people emotionally, nothing that calls to people about why they would want to use this product. Okay, so let's move over to version B. If you're looking for a whiter, brighter smile, meet Snow. It's the best known at-home whitening system in celebrity circles, but just because celebrities use it doesn't mean you don't deserve the same access to professional level whitening. And don't worry, you don't need a celebrity budget to afford it. Keep reading. So as you can see, we took a celebrity angle. Now, this is indeed a product that is popular with celebrities, and I will talk about that in just a sec. But first, the opening sentence, if you're looking for a whiter, brighter smile, meet Snow. Okay, so this is, unsurprisingly, the number one thing that people are looking for when they're looking at home tooth whitening kits. So that's the opening. Is it catchy or clever? Absolutely not. But it does say exactly what readers want from a product performance point of view. We established that right away. The next part is the best known at-home whitening system in celebrity circles. All right, so here's some social proof. Now, good or bad, people are inspired or look up to celebrities. And for the most part, celebrities do indeed have envious smiles and teeth. So there's an exclusivity and aspirational piece there. It's mirroring someone's desire back to them. Now, that's something that we want to do with everything we write, right? We want to mirror back to the reader. They need to see themselves in the copy, if there's any chance of a connection. Social proof gives people that feeling of belonging that I was mentioning. It's, something that we all want to feel. People also want a great smile. It's a really natural thing. Even if we're too embarrassed to admit it, it's actually more visceral that way. We would be embarrassed to say that we want to look better in selfies or on Zoom, but when the desire is visceral or even existential like that, it's more powerful. So if we can show someone that something they desire, even if they're too embarrassed to admit it, is within their reach, it's very motivational. All right, this next sentence. But just because celebrities use it doesn't mean you don't deserve the same access to professional level whitening. All right, so the previous sentence was aspirational. In this sentence, there are actually a few things going on. The first is validation and empathy. I'm sure you've heard that empathy is important with copywriting, but we are validating and empathizing with their aspiration or desire to have the same option that a celebrity has. Something else that's happening here is this cognitive dissonance, which is, I'm sure you're aware, a theory in social psychology. It refers to the mental conflict that happens in us when our behaviors and our beliefs don't necessarily, match up or align. So the conflict here is that most of us regular folk don't necessarily need gleaming white teeth the way a celebrity does because they're in movies and TV. We also don't have the same access to the things that celebrities have access to. But We still want it. And we don't actually believe that we can get it. So this is what creates tension. Tension is something that's really, really important with copywriting. It is something that will carry people through the copy. They want to see how it ends. They want to believe that your product or service can give them the outcome they want. But they don't know yet if they can actually get it. So they'll keep reading to find out if it's going to be possible for them. And this is that happiness they're seeking. That happiness is, we're creating that tension so that they want to find out if there's going to be a happy ending for them. And don't worry, you don't need a celebrity budget to afford it. So here we're building on that tension, giving them just a little bit more to show them that their desire is in fact within their reach. So this is where we're showing them everything's going to be okay. Even if you're not a celebrity, you can still have white teeth. It is within your reach. All right, so there's the two versions again, and it probably comes no surprise at this point that version B did outperform version A. That is the new control, and it outperformed by a significant amount. So let me show you the questions that you need to ask to use to connect emotionally, like I did in this case. All right, so these are the questions. What does your reader want that you can give them? So let's establish that right away. What can your reader aspire to? What can you give them that they want, even if it's embarrassing? How can I validate their aspiration? How do I empathize with what they desire? As humans, we want validation more than just about anything else. We want to be told that what we feel is justifiable and understandable. And then how can we let them know if everything's going to be okay? So in this case with Snow, they want that whiter, brighter smile. We know that. What can they aspire to? That you can get a smile like a celebrity. Not necessarily, they're not going to look like a celebrity, but you can get white teeth like a celebrity. Will they want to admit that they want to get a smile like a celebrity? Some might, but most will probably be too embarrassed to admit it. How can I validate that aspiration? How do I empathize with that desire? You deserve the same access to whitening that celebrities have. You may not be in movies, but you still want to look good in selfies or on Zoom. We understand, it's okay. How can I let them know that everything's going to be okay? Hey, you don't need a celebrity budget to get what you want. It's actually within your reach. So those are the questions that I think you should ask if you really want to dig into writing emotionally resonant copy. It is not the only way to dig in, but it is one way. Sometimes you want to take a more problem approach at the beginning. So I want to quickly show you, actually, before I do that, I just want to say that you can use these questions. They don't have to be on a pre-sale page. They can be used throughout an email or on a page on your website or in an ad. I've had some success using these questions in Facebook ads. Okay, so now I quickly want to show you how we can apply these questions in the hero section of a landing page. Now, Alex, I was watching your last office hours and you had Michael Agard on and you asked him to do a live breakdown of a landing page that you were planning to publish. So I thought I would jump in on the fun and apply those questions to the hero section of this landing page. I know we didn't talk about this, so this is not me saying that I think this is how you should write it. The copy's great the way you have it. And I haven't done any research into your specific audience. I simply use the copy that you already had on this page. And I just want to show one way that we can approach it, or another way we can approach it. So as it stands right now, it's build and scale your thought leadership. Every individual in your company is harboring unique insights about your industry. And if properly articulated and distributed, would be game-changing for growing your business. Building thought leadership could fundamentally change the conversation prospects have about you and your competitors. So looks good, looks great. Let me just show you how I would apply those questions and what it would look like if we use those 4 questions here. Build and scale your thought leadership with as little as 2 hours per week. Time and competing priorities don't need to hold you back from articulating and distributing your unique industry insights. Our thought leadership process is a game changer for your growing business. Okay, so that's how I did it for that particular page. So again, those are the questions and this is how I answered them. What does your reader want that you can give them? You can give them the thought leadership creation and distribution. What can they aspire to? They can become a thought leader in their field. They want to be admired for their thoughts. Does it sound a little embarrassing? Yes, but that's what they want. How can we validate their aspiration? How do we empathize with what they desire? You're being held back because of competing priorities and time. It's not your fault. We understand why this is happening. You don't have to suffer this way anymore. How can I let them know that everything's going to be okay? It will be a game changer for your business. Okay, so those are the 4 questions again that I think we should be asking. And I think I am just right out of time. Thank you.
All right, that was amazing. I think my co-founder David and I are both smiling about that last section there. We've done so many things with our copy. We've done winter testing and different forms of customer research, but that simple framework, those 4 questions, and seeing it done that way, that's pretty cool. So
Yeah,
thank you
well,
for
I think
that.
one of the things we need to remember is that there isn't just one way to approach anything. There are multiple ways. I mean, copywriting is a science and an art. And when I think we forget about the art sometimes, right? There are different things that we can do to approach something.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a question. When you go through copy line by line, like you showed, all of your insights made perfect sense to me when you said that. But
Yeah.
I don't think I would have ever come up with those things the way you did.
Oh,
Like you tied in like cognitive psychology, and you're like, all right, like the celebrity thing here. And like there was like all these theories that you kind of like had underpinning it.
Yeah.
When I look at copy, I just think like, oh, sounds good. It sounds bad.
Right.
Like it's so like colorless, and you've got like so many different colors there. So how do you recommend I learn to look at copy in the way that you did? Is it simply through experience, or like how can I develop a more complex color palette?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there's a few things. One, you just have to be really curious about people. I think that's the thing that drives me the most with copy, is that I'm endlessly curious about people and why we make the decisions that we make. So I love reading about human behavior, psychology, and all the reasons why people do things. I also love, I read a lot of fiction. And for me, that really helps me understand the inner worlds that people have. Like, somebody makes a decision and they do an action, and from the outside, it looks like one thing. But because you're reading the book and the inner monologue that's happening, you see that, it actually makes perfect sense in their world. So I think just being endlessly curious about people. But practically, I mean, definitely, I would recommend reading books that are from like the old direct response, the old school style direct response. They're usually able to really get nerdy about very, very small bits of copy and really dive in there.
Do you have any specific recommendations for books in that field?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a few. Dan Kennedy, Sales Letter. I mean, that's a fantastic one. I think most people have probably read Influence. That's another great one. There's other ones. I love the book. There's a book called Habits of a Happy Brain. And that one I find really interesting. It talks a lot about, hormones and brain science, and why, something, if we're trying to sell something, say too high in a page, like we're not quite ready, how it releases certain hormones, and we have that fight or flight, thing happening. And I know it sounds very extreme, but we feel it. And that's that anxiety that creates, for people, and they'll hesitate. And we don't want people to hesitate when we're getting them close to a conversion point. We want to make sure that we're showing them everything's going to be okay, you're safe. We want to have, that trust bling stuff near a button, just to make sure that they feel there's nothing people want to avoid more than to feel stupid. Like that's like the worst thing, because, a long time ago, being stupid would mean we would die. I know we're getting really heavy here, but, we don't want to feel stupid. We want to survive. So we need to make sure that we're always reassuring, we're always validating, we're always seeing the person that's reading it.
That's awesome. So I think you were on earlier when I was talking about, I just started this book by Robert Sapolsky called Behave. Okay. And I just started the first 2 chapters, and it's like a 700-page book on human behavior. So it's a pretty big landscape that he's covering, but he does it from multiple vantage points. So he's like, all right, there's the behavior, and then there's sort of the nervous system response that led to that behavior like a couple seconds before it, and then there's like the hormonal response that kind of queued up the nervous system maybe minutes to hours before that, and then there's and he goes backwards and backwards. He's like, all right, and then here's the genes, and then here's the evolutionary reasons behind the genes. So it's like sometimes for these behaviors you really do have to track it back pretty far to understand why the brain associates a certain like line or a certain color or a certain like experience with a certain outcome.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll have to read that. But I think that's one thing we can remember with copy is, humans don't change. I mean, certain things that are in pop culture will change things for us and how we approach certain things, but the underlying, humanity stays pretty constant. So as long as we're aware of those, and then we use things that, might be trending at the moment, or pop culture references, or things like that, that we layer throughout, can make our copy more effective.
Yeah, so you queued me up well for this one. Speaking of humans not changing through time, story is probably one of the longest lasting kind of human traits. Like, we've always loved storytelling. I've watched you speak at 3 or 4 conferences. I've watched 3 or 4 talks of yours now, and you are a great storyteller. You always weave in a story, typically through your talk, that kind of elucidates the concept that you're talking about. So is this, do you naturally have this ability, or have you consciously thought through this? Like, how did you learn to weave story into your presentations like this?
Yeah, I think it's probably, one of the reasons why I'm a copywriter. So there's just sort of that innate ability, that we're all born with certain innate abilities. So yeah, I definitely like to relate things back to stories. That's how we grab people. Like, that's how we learn. We always put ourselves in a story, no matter what. I mean, so it's really important to get people's attention and carry their attention. Like I was talking about, the tension in a sales page. Tension is something that keeps us watching a movie or reading a book or listening to someone speak. We want to find out what happens. So storytelling is crucial to copy, and presentations as well. Yeah.
I definitely see it much more clearly in presentations, but it's harder for me to imagine it. Like, people in the content marketing space talk a lot about storytelling in their content and their blog posts, but I don't know if I really see it in the way, like, how I picture a storytelling, like in like a talk, like the Moth Talks. I just read this book called Storyworthy, right? Like, I feel like content usually doesn't have that kind of a lens, and copy, I guess, like sometimes on long form sales pages do, but I don't know. How do you feel about that? Like, do you see story invoked commonly in advertising, in copy, or is it commonly just not done very well?
Yeah,
or...
I would say it's not done very well, or I don't see it enough. I would love to see it more. I'm certainly not an expert with content, but copywriting, yeah, you can absolutely, miss the mark in terms of storytelling. I think people don't necessarily know how to tell a story necessarily, or they think it needs to, sound once upon a time, or there was this guy, and it doesn't have to be like that. It can start in the middle. But it's basically just taking someone from a beginning, middle, and end. And it doesn't have to be, like the typical storytelling that we learned in high school. So yeah, I'm having trouble articulating it. And maybe that's, part of the problem is it's one of those things that can be difficult to teach.
Right, absolutely. So you mentioned that there was multiple emotions that you could target in copywriting. Happiness was the one that you talked about, but there's fear and other emotions.
Yeah.
How do you know or decide which emotions to target in your copy?
So I would say for like a pre-sale page, normally you don't start with happiness and being okay, but because of this particular product, people are fairly solution aware at this point. They're usually shopping around for other tooth whitening kits, so they already are familiar with the promises that they get. But there are other things that maybe people aren't as educated about, and that's when I think you really need to talk about the problem. It could be fear, fear in an ethical way. We want to make sure we're not scaring people, but they may already be nervous about a certain situation in their life. It could be, I don't know, a rash because they are allergic to some chemical that's in a drugstore lotion. And we could open up with, all the things that are going on in their life because of that condition. They can't put a shirt on because it hurts too much, or they're afraid to go out in social situations because, they're embarrassed by the rash or whatever. And then carrying people through. So, we want to make sure that we're really tapping into the problem. I would say most like pre-sale type pages, you're getting into the problem, and then you need to agitate the heck out of it. And you really don't talk about the solution until, 75% of the way through a particular page. We really, really want people to feel that pain, to really get, those specific moments in their life that they can actually relate to. And then they're ready for that relief of what the solution is. So I would say that's like my favorite formula would be starting with a problem, agitate, solution. It's very effective. I would also say it makes people the most nervous. We want to be positive. I hear that a lot, but that's not very positive. And I said, most people don't wake up feeling I feel great about solving my problem. Like we don't think that way. We always have something that we want to overcome, and we need to show people how they can overcome that. But it's super effective and can be difficult for people to use.
Yeah, it's interesting, this idea of like how aware somebody is of the pain point of the problem when they're coming to that page or that experience. Because I would imagine on the tooth whitening thing, it's kind of like people know they don't have white teeth and they want whiter teeth. So it's like pushing that pain point even further, it may not do much, right? Like now you've just got to like kind of sell the upside of the product.
Yeah.
Whereas
exactly.
like I know on our page for our course, it's like we're selling a content strategy course. And we kind of have to answer the question, like, why would you even need to take this? We kind of have to push that pain point that, look, like tons of people are doing content marketing. Most of them are wasting their money. They're lighting it on fire. The real secret to this is appropriate content strategy. So it's like pushing more on that pain point at that stage because they may be less aware of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely push on that, like as much as you can. You know, what Rachel was talking about, like there's that, you know, you have to have that point of view. You have to be brave enough to actually get in there and do that. And then, you know, solve it. And you have to prove it. You have to prove how you're going to solve that problem. You can't just leave them hanging with all of this pain.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, that was awesome. Again, thanks for the incredible walkthrough using our website. We're certainly going to talk about that
It
and
looks good the way
most
it is.
likely use that. So
Awesome.
thank you very much.